All right. So hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Charting the Futures workshop series, Funding Educational Goals, Turning Pennies into Possibilities. I'm Dr. Johnny Mae Morgan from the Office for Youth Engagement at Texas A&M University, and our mission is to increase awareness of post-secondary opportunities among K through 8 students and their families through engaging lessons, community outreach, and programs like this. So when families start thinking about their child's future, one of the biggest and most intimidating questions is, how are we going to pay for it? So whether it's college, trade school, or a certificate program, educational costs can be one real source of stress. But the good news is there are tools, resources, and simple strategies that families can use to start prepping early. I'm joined today by a wonderful guest, Bailey Gruber, who's a regional advisor at Texas A&M University. And Bailey supports students and families through college admissions and financial aid processes. And she's here to help us break this topic down in an approachable, empowering way. So this episode's all about how early, age-appropriate conversations around financial aid, scholarships, and saving for future education. So we're going to get started in just a moment, but I want you to keep in mind, whether your child's in first grade or eighth grade, there's always ways to kind of feel prepared. So let's just jump into how to explore that. So I'm going to kick things off by grounding ourselves a little bit. Now, before we can talk about savings, scholarships, or planning for the future, families need to understand what financial aid actually is. That's often kind of the first roadblock, just making sense of the language and the options. So let's start there. So I do want to ask you, Millie, how would you explain financial aid to a parent who's hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah, so we actually run into this a lot. There's a lot of first gen students that we work with, and sometimes financial aid isn't something that these families even hear about until they're getting into high school and getting into that senior and applying to schools. So the easiest way to explain financial aid is that financial aid is a way to help students and families pay for college or pay for that secondary education that they're pursuing. Simple as that.
Thank you for. I love the conciseness of that because, like I said, financial aid is one of those things that is very convoluted and confusing at times. There's lots of jargon involved.
Yes.
Now, I do want to talk about what are some of the main types of aid families should know about.
Yeah, so one of the biggest ones, and then this is the one I probably harp on my students the most, is scholarships. Scholarships can be through an institution or an organization, sometimes the high schools themselves, and they are basically free money. It's a free way for you to receive money to help pay for your secondary education. So scholarships are going to be the biggest thing that I always tell students to look for. But through our FAFSA, which is the federal aid, you can get loans, grants, and then they also have what they call a work study. So there's about 4 different types of financial aid that a student can receive when they are looking into their secondary education.
Thank you for distinguishing that because some people they're hesitant. They don't know what's, like you said, free money, what's money that I'm just getting, what do I kind of have to pay back?
Mhm.
So where should families start? Like if they're wanting to kind of begin learning about financial aid early on so that they can kind of make the right decisions for their family and their students, how could they begin or where should families actually start?
Yeah, so I actually tell students to look at the FAFSA website. It's so helpful. There's so many resources on that website, and I'll be sharing it in a little while, but it is a great resource for students, especially if you're not very comfortable with going to your counselor or you're wanting to just explore more on your own. The FAFSA website is a great way to get started because it really does break down what loans are, then different types of loans that they have. It'll give you the definitions for things that you might not know what it is. They really simplify everything because you're right, there's so many different moving parts of financial aid and paying for whatever education pathway you are choosing. But the FAFSA website is so helpful. And yes, it could be just a quick Google search of what is a scholarship or what is a grant. What is a loan? Am I going to have to pay back on it? Or what does it look like? But the FAFSA website has all of that on there, and they really do simplify it for the families and the students.
And you said like that has like the definitions on there as well? Because I
Mhm.
know that little usually the I needs information and I always am clicking on that. So in your
Yeah.
experience, it is like a user friendly, like the FAFSA website. And it's because again, when there's a million things you can click, sometimes it's just overwhelming when you go on the website. So from your experience going on
Yes.
the website, it's very kind of user friendly.
Yes, yeah. And actually, most of the time, students will reach out to us and they'll be like, what even is a subsidized loan? And I will go to the FAFSA website and I will copy and paste exactly what it says. But yes, the FAFSA website is very easy to use. I actually am in grad school, and when I was filling out my FAFSA, I was a little worried because this is the first time I'm doing it as an independent student, and it was actually really easy to do. I was actually so surprised on how easy and step by step, they really walk you through everything.
That's certainly relieving because I remember at least back when I did financial aid, I think they were just, I'm gonna age myself. They were like just starting, not necessarily just starting online, but online was still finicky. So
Mhm.
parts were like paper, parts were online, and it's like you get the paper and it's like I said, there is no button you can click for a definition. There was no like Google to ask or Chat GPT to give you
Yeah.
some suggestions. So that's definitely good to know that, especially since that's the system they're using to submit FAFSA. It's definitely good to know that that's kind of user friendly.
Hmm.
So now that we kind of know a bit about what financial aid is and what kind of that terminology is, I do want to try to navigate the process a bit for them. Because at least for me, like I said, I was a first generation college student. So my mother or father didn't have a 4-year bachelor's degree. So there was no one to walk me through that process. And a lot of times, if you haven't gone through that process yourself, it's tough to know what's real, what's a myth, where do we begin, what do I qualify for.
Hmm.
So I want to try to ease those fears a bit and kind of empower those families to take that first step. So, just in your experience, because you have a lot of experience with financial aid, whether it's for 4-year colleges or otherwise. So, what are some of the common myths about financial aid that you sometimes hear or have heard?
Oh, there's so many. There's so many myths out there that we hear all the time, and we'll do financial aid sessions to go over everything, and we're like, this is how it actually is. But I think one of the biggest myths is, especially for students who do fall under that first generation, a lot of students whose parents might not actually be a US citizen, they think, okay, well, now I can't fill out FAFSA. That's not true. We also have TASFA, that's for our students who might fall under that international side of a student here in Texas. But even if you are a US citizen and your parents aren't, you can still fill out FAFSA and they can still make their own account. That's going to be one of the biggest myths out there. Students every semester are coming to me and they're like, I'm scared to fill it out or I can't do it. That's not the case. Actually, in Texas, it's now a requirement that our students do it. So you have to. Um, yes, yeah, it's a requirement for them to graduate high school to fill out the FAFSA for the TASFA. But they get worried because their parent's not a citizen. It's no issue. You can still fill it out. They can still make their own parental account. It's not something that is going to not give them any aid or anything like that. So they can still fill it out. That's probably one of the biggest myths that we hear. The second one is that because there's all these things that you have to put in, like your tax documents, you have to answer all these questions, it's going to take forever. That's not the case. If you have 30 minutes to sit there and scroll on TikTok, you have 30 minutes to fill out the FAFSA. It's simple as that. You just got to sit down and do it. That's going to be the biggest thing. So a lot of times when we're struggling with that or trying to procrastinate, I'm like, okay, let's just count down to 3 and get it done. But it really doesn't take that long, especially when you have everything in order. That's probably also going to be extremely helpful. If you have all your stuff with you, those tax documents are sitting right there next to your parents or your guardians, it's going to be really helpful and easy to get you through it. Um, those are probably some of the two biggest ones. There was another one that I did want to mention. Let's see. Oh, okay. So some students, and this could go for our students who might not be first gen, or maybe their parents just went to school a really long time ago, because that was my case. Or maybe their parents are just really successful. And that is, my parents make too much money, or I don't know how to do it. What do I do? I'm not going to get anything. Even if your parents make over a certain amount, you're still going to receive some type of aid. Is it going to be the aid that you want? Maybe not, but it is still some type of aid, and that changes every single year. And then also with that, again, the resources are there. Counselors are great with working with you on FAFSAs. They do it every year too. So if you are thinking, okay, my parents aren't going to be very helpful, how am I going to get through this? The resources are out there. So it's not that you don't have any access to it. Sometimes you just got to look for it. So that was a 2-in-1. But those are the top 4 kind of myths that we really see with our students. But again, asking for help, there's nothing wrong with that. And then 2, everybody can receive some type of financial aid.
That's a saving grace to know. I know that first myth, it took me a while, I'll put it that way, in education before I actually even knew that those types of financial aid were available. Like for, there's DACA students, there's a lot of different students, and a lot of times they just assume, I mean, rightfully so, it makes sense to assume like there's nothing for me, or I won't, be able to. But I guess, like I said, my dad always know you don't know if you don't try, and if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So I guess, like you said, everybody needs help every now and then. So it's great to ask. But I want to touch on one thing you said because I think it's super important for parents. You mentioned like there are counselors available. And at least in my experience, something I hear often is they don't always know who is that person to go to for their questions. Because a lot of times there's a lot of people within the educational system where it's their job to help. Like that's, and they want to, like they're just, they don't know who needs the help. So they're just waiting and they don't know kind of who needs it. So in your experience with like high schools, whether it's middle schools, high schools, K-12, who are those people in schools? You mentioned like counselors. Are there particular counselors, or who could they go through or go to, excuse me, with these questions, or like when they need help?
Yeah, so every school is different, every district is different. But most of our schools here in Texas, they've started implementing college readiness counselors or college excellence counselors. Those are definitely the counselors you're going to want to seek for any kind of help. Because sometimes they'll have that college readiness counselor, and then they have that counselor that helps you just schedule your classes. You maybe see them once a semester. Definitely, if there is that college readiness program, go and talk to them. If for some reason your school doesn't have a college readiness counselor, you can always go to the counselor that can help you schedule your classes because they have some kind of contact to somebody that would be able to help you. But also, if they don't, and there's maybe an AP teacher or a AVID teacher, an AVID program, you can always go to them. Even if you've never had them, it doesn't mean that you can't go ask that teacher, right? That's what they're there for. They're there to help you learn. And I think that one thing, as somebody who is a little bit on the younger side, but also somebody who just was there in school, it can be so scary to even ask, right? You don't even want to ask. But just like you said, if you don't ask, the answer is going to be no. But those are definitely some people you can reach out to. Those are probably the like counselors and the teachers. Those are the ones we work with the most as an institution, especially when we're setting up high school visits and so forth. And even us recruiters, we can help. So if there is an institution that your student is looking at, you can always reach out to that institution's recruiter and say, hey, I'm struggling in this. Can you point me in the right direction? That's what our job is, just like you said. So we are here to do that. But there's definitely quite a few different people you can reach out to, even if your school doesn't necessarily have a college readiness counselor.
I do know for a fact, like you mentioned, Avid, we do a lot of like our, at the Office for Youth Engagement, we do a lot of workshops inside of classrooms. And I will for sure see Avid teachers because oftentimes the Avid teachers, they'll teach another class or they
Mhm.
teach another type of class. And even in like Frisco ISD, I've been in classes that are, it's not worded Avid.
Yeah.
It's skills for living is kind of what their class is called. But they teach a lot of different topics, but they're always talking to students that are not considered their avid students.
Hmm.
So that's definitely a good resource that I think a lot of people may not know, even though CTE teachers, I
Yes.
haven't met a CTE teacher like the career technical education or the CCMR, the college and career military readiness, or the AVID teachers. I haven't met a single one who isn't thrilled when somebody asks a conversation, especially if it's about a college they went to or if it's a trade that they're doing that they're into. So those are definitely, I think, some great resources that they can ask. And I'm glad that you mentioned, like you said, the counselors and the recruiters. I'm always at events. It's the moment somebody asks me a question, I was like, you know what? I don't know. However, let's find out together. And I'm like, what district are you in? No matter where I'm at, it'll be a community, event. What district are you in? And the moment they say what district they're in, I'll go into that. I mean, you can Google that TAMU, put your, DFW, and then put Prospective Student Center. I go directly to there, and then I'll just look for the district and find, which one of you guys in recruiting kind of match up with the district and say, a lot of times you could click this link here to schedule an appointment. I was like, they want to ask you, you're not bothering them. They want to answer your questions. I was like, and they'll actually be with you through that process.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you guys are there from beginning to end, right? Like, I mean, you guys are doing decision days. So
Yep. Yeah, we're doing a bunch of decision days right now. And yes, we're there from the beginning to the end, sometimes even way before the beginning even needs to start. So we do have some very good early students who are and parents who are very interested in getting that process started early, which is definitely something we'll talk about soon. But yes, yeah, we're there to help. You can even reach out to an institution's financial aid department. It's as simple as that. You can just call them and ask a question, right? That's literally in our job title to help y'all do. So don't be scared just because we have Texas A&M in front of us, or even University of Texas Arlington. Just because there's some kind of institutional name tied to us, it doesn't mean that you're bothering us when you ask us questions. That's, like I said, it's our job. We love helping students make sure that you guys are getting what you need.
Every university I've been attended multiple universities, worked at multiple universities, but a lot of times there's different processes. Even myself, when I went to visit Tarrant Community College or Texas State Technical College, like I was asking those same questions because I didn't have that information either. So I'm glad we definitely touch on those resources because it can definitely be overwhelming and you need somebody kind of reliable to go to. So those are some great resources. Now, now we know about the financial aid side of it. One of the topics that is, in my experience, difficult to kind of breach or that parents have expressed to me at Hemling events and community events is their kids, when they talk about money, they just want money and they want to get things with money. They don't necessarily understand it. They don't necessarily understand how it functions. I mean, right, so they're totally right. And the parents are actively teaching them. Like I've met a lot of parents that, no, I'm teaching them about bank accounts, we're teaching about budgeting and things of that nature. So they are having those conversations about money. But at times they've expressed that those conversations, especially with the younger children, it's at times stressful. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have to be stressful. Like you can actually kind of make it playful, creative. So like, do you know of any, like, what are some age appropriate ways that you can talk to kids about kind of education costs? And just so they really understand like the context and the gravity of that.
Yeah, so there's a few ways. Actually, I mean, some of the things you might learn, they might be learning in school, but I think the biggest thing is, kids love games, right? They love playing different games. That's what they're all about. And if there's a way that you can make it into almost a game to help them learn, that's probably going to be the biggest thing. A good example could be just, and they do this in classrooms all the time. You get these certain stars, and then you get to pick a prize from the treasure chest, like there's different things like that. So maybe a good way to do it is, okay, every day that you get your homework done by dinner time, you get $1. And then you price things at different things. That's a game to them, right? Because they're going to have to work to build up that money in order to get what they want. For us as adults, we got to work every day so that we can get that money to pay for what we want, whether it's a car payment, our phone payment, things like that. And even for me, in my case, I got to work every day so that I can pay for grad school. So for these students, that could just be an easy way to kind of introduce money. I believe it's around like third grade that's when they really start learning the value of money and coins and what it really means. But we just learn these definitions and it doesn't really mean anything to us until we start applying it. And so that could be a really easy way to apply it. And yes, it does take some extra time, but that extra time that you're implementing into helping them with understanding the value of money and the hard work behind it is obviously very much going to help in the long run. I think another thing too is it's really easy to see all of these other students maybe that you go to school with, or these influencers, and they're getting money so fast that it makes it look so easy. Helping these students at a younger age to understand that that's not necessarily always the case that happens can also help to have them save and understand that it's not going to be cheap. I also think that a lot of our students aren't oblivious to financial situations. Yes, when they get, maybe $20, $40 when they're for Christmas or for what birthday or something like that, they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to go buy this automatically. But they also aren't oblivious to what's going on. And yes, those can be hard conversations to have, right? You don't want to feel like you're disappointing your students. You don't want to have them feel like all of a sudden they have to do, X, Y, and Z. They have to get 5 jobs on top of going to school. You don't want them to feel like that. But they're also not oblivious to what's going on, especially once they are getting into high school. A lot of that awareness really starts to come into play. And so I think that just being honest with your student is honestly one of the best ways to help them be prepared for what comes after high school, and if they are going into a specific educational program and what it might cost. So I think that's the biggest thing, because it can also help them when they are looking for scholarships, when they are talking to their counselors or their teachers or even the financial aid office at departments. If they don't know, if you're not honest with them, that can hurt them in the long run. So there's a few different ways to go about it. And sometimes talking about money, like I said, it's not a comfortable subject. But sometimes it's one of those conversations that just needs to be had. Like that conversation on why they got a B on their math test, or why they didn't do a specific organization when they should have. So it's one of those conversations that is a reality, especially when it comes to paying for that higher education, no matter what pathway it is.
That's definitely, you're right. You're right. They're not as oblivious. And yeah, I don't think they're oblivious. So that's definitely a good point. And for me, I guess, at least in my experience, is the conversations are hard to have, but I think a lot of them are, they're ready to kind of have those conversations
They
and
are.
approaching it, like you said, the right way. Like you said, why did you get to be on that test? You have those hard conversations. So maybe instead of you need money to get those shoes, maybe opening up some of the costs of education. Like, look at how much this book costs, or, like these are how much classes cost. And I guess that's also a way to kind of pull in that terminology of colleges, because there's a lot of things they don't always think of, at least when it's in college. Like when we go in for workshops, we discuss a lot of different things. Like they think of tuition, think of like room and board, but there's smaller things like entertainment, there's college decor, and it's not a bad thing. You can still have, those things that you want. You just have to kind of budget for it. You have to account for it, and you have to save for it. So it's not like you can't have all of those things that you enjoy, because a lot of times I think the students I've talked to, when they talk about money, it's a lot of, if you don't need it, then you don't spend your money on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, I guess, a balancing game of, you do spend your money on it, but not all of it. You don't put it all in the once. You get your needs taken care of, save for that rainy day, those unexpected expenses, and then you can kind of get whatever wants you want with the little bit that you have kind of set aside for that.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times the conversation about education is very heavily focused on college and affording like a university or a 4-year college.
Yep.
And they're not necessarily saying that's the only option. And it's not even like they're purposely like only targeting those universities, but the conversation just always seems to drift around what those costs are. But we know that's not the only option. So there's trade schools, certifications, and even community colleges. And I think oftentimes what happens is when we're discussing what funds are available, like you said in the beginning, they don't even know what's available all the time for 4-year universities. And it's like there's even less knowledge on possibilities for other pathways. So how can families even prepare financially for trade schools or technical programs? Because I believe there are some differences to this, right?
Yes, yeah, there's definitely some differences. Actually, some of these technical programs that we have in these technical institutions, what you pay for in that whole program is could be a semester at a 4-year institution. Actually, most trade and technical programs and certifications can range anywhere, these programs can range anywhere between $5,000 to $25,000. And that can be dependent on different certifications you need, different equipment you might need. Like if you're going into HVAC, there's a lot of different things that you're having to get. Welding can be the same. Even lineman school, there's a lot of different things that you're having to pay for, whether it's tools, a certification program that's a part of getting that license. There's a lot of things that a lot of families don't really think about when they're looking at these programs. They're seeing fast education, fast money, get to work faster. That's what they're seeing. They're not seeing the behind the scenes cost of everything. So they might not know that lineman school can cost up to $25,000, but it doesn't mean that there's not any kind of aid for you to pay for that. Actually, FAFSA does cover most trade and technical schools. So even if you aren't going to a 4-year institution, you can still fill out FAFSA because it can be applied to that. And then there's also scholarships through those institutions as well. Some scholarships that are out there through an organization, it could be only for students who are wanting to go into a trade school. So there is different ways to pay out there for any kind of different option other than a 4-year. And you also kind of mentioned community college, and I actually love to tell my students who are worried about any kind of financial situation to look into a community college. Biggest thing I will say when you are looking at a community college is if there's another institution you are wanting to go to after that community college, make sure you're following their requirements. But some certifications you only need 2 years. We have so many students who are wanting to go into a technician program. I believe I'm blanking on it right now. It's the technician program through the hospital where you're like doing kind of the x-ray stuff. Kind of like an x-ray technician program. I can't remember.
And radiology and things like
Yes,
that.
thank you. Radiology. I was like, it's on the tip of my tongue. Yes, radiology. A lot of students are coming to us asking if we have a radiology program, and I let them know that's actually something you can get at a community college. That is a certification that's only going to take you 2 years, while maybe your friend who wants to become a RN has to go through a 4-year program. So there's definitely things out there that are going to cost less that you might be more interested in. And even with a community college, one thing that a lot of families don't know is if you are going into a community college that is not necessarily in your county, you will have to pay a little bit of a higher tuition because you're going outside of your own county. And that's just, again, community college, it's part of the county. It's something that's within that city finance situation, but some students don't even know that. And so if finances are something you are super worried about, sometimes it's better to go to Tarrant County College rather than Collin. So it's just like there's different things that might come into play when it comes to different pathways. And there's hidden finances that sometimes we aren't always aware of. And so when you are finding a trade program, make sure that one of the first things you do is you look at how expensive it might be, but you also look to see what kind of scholarship opportunities they have. That could mean also reaching out to one of their recruiters or even just emailing with them.
And Dallas College, as well as Tarrant Community College, has a lot of branches. And
Yes.
even when I went to visit Tarrant County College earlier in the summer, kind of they had their different campuses specialized in different things.
Mhm.
And when you registered for one, you were actually registered for all of the campuses and could take classes at any of the campuses. So it could be online or whichever is, based upon your location. And even where I'm from, way back in Ohio, they definitely are community college. That's the community college that I went. That's where I started out. And they have a lot of programs. They even have what's called university partnerships. Like you said, if you want to go to you can do your first 2 years, then go to that 4-year university, but make sure you know which classes transfer. But they had a lot of university partnerships to where if you finish those 2 years, you kind of were not automatically in, but it was kind of like your pathway into going directly to that university. You already had those classes done. You had those relationships developed. I mean, a lot of our Texas A&M has those STEM academies or engineering academies in the area, to where if you're part of those engineering academies and taking the classes, and then you can kind of transfer over afterwards. So that's definitely a venture. And you said that FAFSA also, so when they're applying for that same system, It applies for trade schools in the same, like you go through the same process, and it just applies for the trade schools as well.
Yep. Yeah, I actually learned that. I think it was on Monday. I was kind of just going over some stuff, to brief myself and study for our little meeting today. But I was kind of looking into it more because I have had a few students who have came to our tables when we're at schools and ask us if we have certain trade programs. And unfortunately at Texas A&M we don't, but then they do get to asking kind of about our tuition and financials if they were to take another route. And so I was curious myself. And when I found that out, again, it was on the FAFSA website, so it was legitimate. It is something that they do. And when I found that out, I was like, oh my goodness, this is great. Because there is a lot of students who are going through these programs in high school, and maybe college isn't for them. College is not for everybody, right? We do have to have welders. We do have to have linemen out there. We do have to have the emergency people that are on the there's so many different other jobs out there that also are going to get you to what you have a passion about, or are going to get you that bag that you're looking for. But there's so many different ways to get there, and I didn't know that. I was like, oh my goodness, this is great, because there are students who come to us and don't even realize that FAFSA can help them pay for that too. So yeah, I was super shocked about it as well.
You think that that is, like I said, another one of those myths that if you want to go to a trade, because like you said, college is perfect for a lot of people. Maybe some people like working with their hands more, or they learn better kind of in those atmospheres. That is something that is applicable across the board for some people. It depends on, you go to where you want to go, you go with what's best for you, and you can actually choose what you want to do, what you enjoy to do, and FAFSA can kind of be used for all of those, because all of the schools, they kind of have a school code that I mean, you're well aware of what you put in FAFSA. So you can use FAFSA at any school that has one of those federal accreditations and one of those school codes on there. And a lot of the community colleges, as well as trade schools, have that federal accreditation and those school codes. And all it is kind of inputting that number, like you said, in that FAFSA website that takes those 30 minutes when you're scrolling through TikTok or watching YouTube and parent workshop series. You could do it after, though. You could do your FAFSA after. But I do want to know, like you said that earlier, that you love the website and you had some things that you wanted to show them in the website, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you get definitely, I'm excited to see what you would like to show them, because I'm one of those people, a lot of times you can explain it, but until I see what you're talking about, it doesn't kind of click. So you can definitely, I would love to see what you want to show to kind of walk us through a few things, and that could help with financing and kind of funding educational goals.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me get it popped up. Okay, can y'all see it all right?
Yes, I could see the FAFSA website.
Okay, so this is just the overall FAFSA. I literally just typed in FAFSA, click the first link. Obviously you can see that there's quite a few different things here. But even when you're looking, you can look at the different grants and loans, things that you might get. There's tools and calculators that students can use when you're looking at tuition for schools and what you might get. It talks about all the different kinds of loans and grants that we might have. But there's a few different things that I do want to point out first. So as a parent, I'm not a parent. I'm a four-legged parent. I have pets. But one of the things I tell our parents who might have a middle schooler or looking to start their students early is, if you actually just keep scrolling down, it says how financial aid works. It's like almost the very bottom of this page, right? And so you can click start planning early, and it will take you to the different checklist for those who are in elementary school, middle school, and then our students who could be in high school already, and different kinds of grades for that. Even if you're a student now who's kind of questioning, or you've already gotten your bachelor's, they even have a grad school and an adult student checklist. So I was clicking around earlier, but for our elementary checklist, I kind of just wanted to see what it might say. And so this was something that they were trying to kind of let parents know this is what they should work on their student with, which do your best in school, read a lot, and have fun learning. Usually a lot of students do have fun learning in elementary school, right? Everything's so new to us. But then they also have a kid zone that helps with different games and puzzles and helps them learn a little bit more on their math. And I thought that was super cool. That's a resource that you can go here and have your students use as a game when they want to play on the computer. And then they also have a parent checklist. So if you are working with a kindergartner, help them to develop an interest in reading, read aloud to them, check your child's homework, and then start saving for your child's education, whether it's college or a trade school. That's something that you can start once they actually start kindergarten or once they're starting to get more engaged in education. So that's probably one of the biggest resources I thought was going to be the most helpful, because I didn't know about it until I started playing around with it, right? But to have it for both elementary, middle school, and then high school students, you don't see that all on one website very often. So that's probably one of the biggest things I did want to show. And then also, if you were to click on the FAFSA form, they have this tab right here. It says Learn About FAFSA, so you can see the different ways on how to fill it out. You can look at the deadlines. You can see how to check your FAFSA status to see where you might be at, how to correct your FAFSA if there's something that you accidentally listed as wrong. They even have their help center here. So there's a lot of different resources on this website. And like once you really start getting and playing around with it, you'll learn so much. And it'll actually be so much easier for you once you are having to complete your own FAFSA form, whether it's, you as a parent who is having to fill out their account or helping your student to fill out their FAFSA form.
Thank you so much for walking us through that, because like I said, sometimes you just have to like see what's going on and see that walkthrough to make sense of it at times. Yeah. At least for me, definitely have to do that to make sense of it. Now, there is a website that I would love to show as well that helps me, and I always will use this website. It's Big Future. You could do it's bigfuture.collegeboard.org, but you could just do bigfuture.com and it'll pull it up, and it's through College Board. Now, when you're in Big Future, it has a lot of different things. You can explore different career pathways. You can take a career quiz. It also has things to plan for college. You can find your best fit of college. You can compare colleges. You can explore different majors and what's going on. But also, the biggest thing is the Pay for College tab. So give me just a moment to see if it'll let me share this with you guys here. All right. So this is the bigfuture.com website. Now, if you click on Pay for College, you can do a scholarship search, which I always suggest if you don't kind of know where to start, you can click on scholarship search. And when you look through, it'll tell you what the scholarship is, the name of it, if it's open as in accepting applications, when it actually opens to accept applications, what the deadline is. It'll tell you everything you need to become eligible, and it'll also tell you what you need to do in order to actually complete that process. Then it also will have how much will college cost, and it'll go over the different aspects of college, as well as it does look at all the alternative pathways of education to see how much that costs as well. Getting help paying for college, that discusses some of the resources that you mentioned earlier about how you can actually get the money that you need, and they kind of tie it to what pathway you're going in, because there may be some funds, like you said, there's some scholarships that are for trade schools solely, and you can kind of connect with different types of scholarships. And the best part about this is if you create an account on there, you can have your own lists, and it'll have a scholarship list, you can have a college list, you can have a career list. So if you sit down with your student and do a career quiz, it'll save the results, and you can actually explore that career. It'll give you different things like, what education does this career require? What's the rate of jobs that will become available in the coming future? As in, is this a growing job? Is this a growing field? It'll tell you how much it's growing. It'll also tell you what is the actual average of those getting the jobs? Because we all know some jobs will ask for you to have a bachelor's degree. However, maybe they're hiring people with a master's degree. But when you go to that pay for college, at least that was the biggest thing for me, because when I looked for scholarships, there wasn't a way to save it. If I wasn't exactly like applying to it then, I would try to write it down. And if I lost that paper or if I lost that document, got deleted, I couldn't find it anymore, it would just be gone by the time I wanted to use it. And the best part about this is it's tied to an email. You can look at when your student is in sixth grade. They might not even need those until way later on in high school, their junior year. But you can click the little heart on there and save those scholarships and keep them in mind. Now, if it is a couple years ahead, maybe some of those scholarships might not be available, but you can at least save it and you have those names because you can remember the name, like I said, see the eligibility, and you can just keep adding to that. And you can also remove it if you'd like. So that's one of the biggest things that I like. And also, if your student takes the PSATs, since it's connected to College Board, it actually can connect to your Big Future account as well. So I just wanted to definitely share that resource since we were kind of sharing resources, because that is actually, I like to say, it comes in clutch. It for sure comes in clutch. Now, let's see. Chief Readiness says wasn't aware of the different resources outside of filling out the FAFSA yearly. Well, yes. So that is why we're here, is to give you those different resources. So I'm glad it was actually helpful to have those different alternative pathways. So thank you for that, Bailey. Definitely give us a couple pathways that we can kind of use. Now, when we're thinking of, you mentioned saving money with your student and to teach them kind of to be more responsible with their money and earning what they're purchasing and getting those habits. Are there any other habits that you know that students can kind of build now that might help them later on?
Yeah, so there's quite a few different actual resources out there. I know personally for us, one resource that we have for our current students is we have a money education center. Not all institutions necessarily have a department just for that, but that is something we do. And I was kind of looking around on stuff to prepare. A easy thing that you could do is make a budget. That's something that you can do if you're deciding, okay, my students in high school now, I'll give them $20 a week for an allowance. Let's make a budget. You got to show me what your budget is in order to get that $20 every week, because I want to see what you're doing with it. Let's be smart with your money. That's an easy thing. Some things just to even teach responsibilities. Maybe your student gets a part-time job in the summer or something similar of that nature. So that's something that they can do now. Jobs also look great on resumes because that's experience. And that can go for if you're going to college or if you're even going into a trade school, because that's, again, experience that they're getting. But those are probably going to be the top two that I can really think of off of the top of my head. But there are so many different resources out there. Sometimes it's even something they might be learning in an economics class they have to take while they're in high school. So the thing is like I said, they're not oblivious to it. Sometimes they want to get the same color sneakers that their friends have because all their friends have that same color sneaker. But it doesn't mean that there can't be a way we can teach them, okay, yeah, you might want those sneakers, but maybe you have to get good grades for this semester in order to get those sneakers. There's different ways to work up to it to show them that, there is kind of a grit that they have to have in order to continue to get the money to pay for what they want, whether it's that favorite sneaker, that new sneaker that's out, or their education. So that's just some of the things. Again, there's definitely different resources out there. Even if it's just a budget. Like I said, it can be as simple as a budget, helping them create a budget. You kind of mentioned this earlier is, maybe taking them to the bank and having them set up like a student card. That's actually something I did with my mom when I was a senior in high school. Right before I got in, I, got my admissions into A&M, and then she was like, okay, well, looks like we're going to have to get you a credit card. And then she kind of explained to me how the process worked. We did a student card. Actually, I just aged out of it. So now I'm having to find a different way to get that to work. But there's different things that you can do instead of just always handing them that $20 bills or handing them your credit card, right? Is once they start seeing their own money getting put into that bank account and then getting pulled out, sometimes that kind of teaches them a little bit about what it means to work for it and to work for where they want to go, whether again it's a college or a trade school.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the things I did I think elementary school. When I got one of my first jobs was delivering newspapers.
Mhm.
Yes, kiddos. We used to have to deliver the paper to people's houses. They didn't just get it on the internet. And when I would get my paychecks, I had my first merit bank account where I would have put my money in that bank account. And it also, now that I'm thinking about it, it also is where I learned to balance a checkbook because
Mhm.
you used to have to keep track of your transactions to know how much is in your bank account. You didn't just access the app, which is also amazing. But a lot of things that they have is when you're on those banking apps now, they separate your transactions. So you can
Mhm.
also, like you said, budgeting is definitely one of the best habits that you can create. I like to say it always balances that work and play. Because to
Mhm.
me, as long as my needs are taken care of, I put a little bit in the bank to save. But if there's something left over, at least for me, my love is traveling. So I'm trying to book a ticket somewhere. I'm
Mhm.
trying to travel somewhere, see something, or do something. So it's great that I can also see if I'm not having the money for the things that I'm wanting, I can go to the banking app. And I know a lot of people do this, so it might be helpful to teach your student to look at a banking app, see the separating, oh, I'm spending this much on streaming services, or I'm
Mhm.
spending this much on fast food and takeout. So it helps them understand where their money is going so they can see where they might be able to kind of cut back on to afford the other things that they're wanting. Or if they started transitioning from just things they want, like sneakers, the movies, video games, V-Bucks, and things like that, then they're transitioning to college. It could also help them understand, okay, if I curb here, I can kind of start saving for college there.
Mhm.
So that's definitely a great habit for them to have. Now, if you had to a parent that said they had absolutely nothing and they were starting at absolute scratch, what is the first thing or the one action you would tell a parent to take this week to just get started, either having the conversations about education or just getting started kind of on that pathway to understanding and supporting funding educational opportunities?
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest ways to start is by saving, right? Whether it's they want to go to college or they want to go to a trade school, you're going to have to save. And so it could be easy as you're putting $5 in a jar under the mattress. If you don't have $5, it can be $1. There's definitely different ways. I know even from experience, my fiance's mom, every time she had extra change, she threw it in the jar, and that's how he got his ring for A&M. So there's definitely different ways that you can find to save on that aspect if you're starting from scratch. Now, if you're starting from scratch, having that conversation of this is what it's going to cost if you want to go here, then again, I'm going to go back to just being honest and open, even if that means showing them look, this is the breakdown of what the cost of tuition is going to be here at A&M. Let's talk about what can be realistic. Let's talk about what you might need to do in order if it's getting good grades to help you get scholarships, if it's maybe getting that part-time job, or even just saving your birthday money. Let's talk about it. That's probably going to be the easiest, especially if you're working with older kids. And then if you're working with, younger youth, then okay, let's talk about maybe implementing those stars to figure out how, okay, if they have 5 stars, then they get that little toy. And it could be something as simple as a ball or something that's small, right? But implementing into it somehow is going to be really helpful when you're working with your student. And if it's just you in general who's wanting to figure out a little bit more about money management and so forth, go buy a book. That's one of probably the biggest things that is going to be helpful is go look at some of the books, talk to even some of your friends that might have students who are entering college or they're getting up to that age of going into college. Hey, what are you guys doing? A lot of it is word of mouth of figuring out what's that next step that could be beneficial to you and your family. And so there's definitely different ways to get out there and start working on it today. I know personally, I'm not even married yet, end of this year kind of thing. Kids aren't going to be something that we're looking at until later on, but that's something that we've talked about. Okay, when we have students, or when we have children, what is one thing we're going to want for them? A good education. We were able to have that. We want to be able to provide for that. Okay, that means we're going to have to start setting aside stuff every month of this is going to be in the savings for this. And so those are conversations you can have with yourself, with your spouse, with your students, but starting early is definitely going to be very helpful. And again, you can start now, even if it's that jar under the mattress.
Those are definitely some great actions to take. Because I at least know me definitely way back in elementary school, like as early as, and I think even in junior high, I had it to a certain extent of book it to where if you read so many books, you got a personal pan pizza at Pizza Hut. Definitely would be reading so that I could kind of accomplish that. Any kind of those little rewards, or if it was like money for the book fair, I loved the Scholastic book fairs. So that's definitely a way to kind of bridge and associate it with education is you're gonna have to start paying for school. So start teaching them those skills now, or just those habits of saving money, and not just saving money, but having a goal of what they want to buy and then seeing how much they need for that goal and then saving their money to kind of achieve that, as well as later on is going directly to the programs. Maybe you want to be, like I said, HVAC. So you go to a HVAC programs, it's about this much, and maybe I could save this much and this much to pay for, the tools that I may need, or the tuition and room and board is this much. So maybe I could start kind of chipping away at that. So it's definitely good to kind of have the goal in mind that you're trying to achieve, and then making that plan and then taking those steps towards it. But that's towards the end of it, since we took a lot of your time today, but definitely the parents. So I want to thank everybody for joining us with our funding educational goals. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit about turning those pennies into possibilities, and hopefully we at least gave not only clarity, but some hope and encouragement, because again, financing educational goals can for sure be overwhelming. And a huge thank you to our guest, Bailey Hoomer, for sharing her knowledge and insight. Your guidance is definitely helping make financial aid a little less intimidating and certainly more empowering, especially those resources that you kind of shared with us. But everybody, don't forget to like and subscribe to Level Up Texas channel so you don't miss the next episode. And let's just keep planting those seeds of possibility together. So I want to thank again everybody for